Section 16 of Black Experience in America, 18th through 20th century. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hot-Foot Hannibal by Charles W. Chesnutt. Recording by Phil Chenevert. Black Experience in America, 18th through 20th century. Hot-Foot Hannibal. I hate you and despise you. I wish never to see you or speak to you again. Very well. I will take care that henceforth you have no opportunity to do either. These words, the first in the passionately vibrant tones of my sister-in-law, and the latter in the deeper and more restrained accents of an angry man, startled me from my nap. I had been dozing in my hammock on the front piazza behind the honeysuckle vine. I had been faintly aware of a buzz of conversation in the parlor, but had not at all awakened to its import until these sentences fell, or, I might rather say, were hurled upon my ear. I presume the young people had either not seen me lying there, the Venetian blinds opening from the parlor windows upon the piazza were partly closed on account of the heat, or else in their excitement they had forgotten my proximity. I felt somewhat concerned. The young man, I had remarked, was proud, firm, jealous of the point of honor, and, from my observation of him, quite likely to resent to the bitter end what he deemed a slight or an injustice. The girl I knew was quite as high-spirited as young Murchison. I feared she was not so just, and hoped she would prove more yielding. I knew that her affections were strong and enduring, but that her temperament was capricious, and her sunniest moods easily overcast by some small cloud of jealousy or pique. I had never imagined, however, that she was capable of such intensity as was revealed by these few words of hers. As I say, I felt concerned. I had learned to like Malcolm Murchison, and had heartily consented to his marriage with my ward, for it was in that capacity that I had stood for a year or two to my wife's younger sister Mabel. The match thus rudely broken off had promised to be another link binding me to the kindly Southern people among whom I had not long before taken up my residence. Young Murchison came out of the door, cleared the piazza in 2 strides without seeming aware of my presence, and went off down the lane at a furious pace. A few moments later Mabel began playing the piano loudly, with a touch that indicated anger and pride and independence and a dash of exultation, as though she were really glad that she had driven away forever the young man whom the day before she had loved with all the ardor of a first passion. I hoped that time might heal the breach and bring the 2 young people together again. I told my wife what I had overheard. In return, she gave me Mabel's version of the affair. "I do not see how it can ever be settled," my wife said. "It is something more than a mere lovers' quarrel. It began, it is true, because she found fault with him for going to church with that hateful Branson girl, but before it ended there were things said that no woman of any spirit could stand. I am afraid it is all over between them." I was sorry to hear this. In spite of the very firm attitude taken by my wife and her sister, I still hoped that the quarrel would be made up within a day or 2. Nevertheless, when a week had passed with no word from young Murchison, and with no sign of relenting on Mabel's part, I began to think myself mistaken. On a pleasant afternoon, about 10 days after the rupture, old Julius drove the rockaway up to the piazza, and my wife, Mabel, and I took our seats for a drive to a neighbor's vineyard over on Lumberton Plank Road. "Which way shall we go?" I asked. "The short road or the long one?" "I guess we had better take the short road," answered my wife. "We will get there sooner." "It's a mighty fine drive down by the big road, Miss Annie," observed Julius, "and it don't take much longer to get there." "No," said my wife, I think we will go by the short road. There is a bay tree in blossom near the mineral spring, and I wish to get some of the flowers." "I specs you'd find some bay trees along the big road, ma'am," suggested Julius. "But I know about the flowers on the short road, and they are the ones I want." We drove down the lane to the highway and soon struck into the short road leading past the mineral spring. Our route lay partly through a swamp, and on each side the dark umbrageous foliage, unbroken by any clearing, lent to the road solemnity and to the air a refreshing coolness. About half a mile from the house, and about halfway to the mineral spring, we stopped at the tree of which my wife had spoken, and, reaching up to the low-hanging boughs, I gathered a dozen of the fragrant white flowers. When I resumed my seat in the rockaway, Julius started the mare. She went on for a few rods until we had reached the edge of a branch crossing the road, when she stopped short. "Why did you stop, Julius?" I asked. "I didn't, sir," he replied. "'Twas the mare stop. G'long there, Lucy, what you mean for this foolishness?" Julius jerked the reins and applied the whip lightly, but the mare did not stir. "Perhaps you had better get down and lead her," I suggested. "If you get her started, you can cross on the log and keep your feet dry." Julius alighted, took hold of the bridle, and vainly essayed to make the mare move. She planted her feet with even more evident obstinacy. "I don't know what to make of this," I said. "I have never known her to balk before. Have you, Julius?" "No, sir," replied the old man. "I never has. It's a curious thing to me, sir." "What's the best way to make her go?" "I specs, sir, dat if I turn her round she go de udder way." "But we want her to go this way." "Well, sir, I 'low if we just set here for 5 minutes she'll start up by herself." "All right," I rejoined. "It is cooler here than any place I have struck today. We'll let her stand for a while and see what she does." We sat in silence for a few minutes, when Julius suddenly ejaculated, "Uh-huh! I knows why dis mare don't go. It's des flash 'cross my recommembrance." "Why is it, Julius?" I inquired. "'Cause she sees Chloe." "Where is Chloe?" I demanded. "Chloe's been dead these 40 years or mo'," the old man returned. "Her hate is settin' over yonder on de udder side of de branch, under dat willow tree dis blessed minute." "Why, Julius," said my wife, "do you see the haunt?" "No'm," he answered, shaking his head. "I don't see her, but de mare sees her." "How do you know?" I inquired. "Well, sir, dis yer is a gray hoss, and dis yer is a Friday, and a gray hoss kin allers see a haunt what walks on Friday." "Who is Chloe?" said Mabel. "And why does Chloe's haunt walk?" asked my wife. "It's all in de tale, ma'am," Julius replied with a deep sigh. "It's all in de tale." "Tell us the tale," I said. "Perhaps by the time you get through the haunt will go away and the mare will cross." I was willing to humor the old man's fancy. He had not told us a story for some time, and the dark and solemn swamp around us, the amber-colored stream flowing silently and sluggishly at our feet, like the waters of Lethe, the heavy aromatic scent of the bays, faintly suggestive of funeral wreaths, all made the place an ideal one for a ghost story. "Chloe," Julius began in a subdued tone, "used to belong to old Mars' Dugal Markadoo, my old master. She was a likely gal and a smart gal, and old Miss took her up to the big house and larned her to wait on de white folk, till by she come to be the missus' own maid, and 'peared to 'low she run de house herself, to hear her talk about it. I was a young boy den, and used to work 'bout de stables, so I knowed everything dat was gwine on roun' de plantation. Well, one time Mars' Dugal wanted a house boy, and sont down to de quarters fer to have Jeff and Hannibal come up to de big house nex' mornin'. Ole master and ole miss looked de two boys ober, and sussed wid derselves fer a little while, and den Mars' Dugal says he, We likes Hannibal de best, and we gwine to keep him. Here, Hannibal, you work at the house from now on, and if you are a good nigger and minds your business, I'll give you Chloe for a wife next spring. You other nigger, you Jeff, you can go back to the quarters. We ain't gwine to need you." Now Chloe had been standing there behind Ole Miss doing all this here talk, and Chloe made up her mind from the very first minute she set eyes on them two that she didn't like that nigger Hannibal, and wa'n't never gwine to care for him, and she was dus as sho that she liked Jeff, and was gwine to set store by him, whether Mars' Dugal took him in the big house or no. And so, course, Chloe was monster sorry when old Mars' Dugal took Hannibal and sent Jeff back. So she slipped round the house and waylaid Jeff on the way back to the quarters, and told him not to be downheaded, for she was gwine to see if she couldn't find some way or nuther to get rid of that nigger Hannibal, and get Jeff up to the house in his place. The new house boy cotch on monstrous fast, and it wasn't no time hardly before Mars' Dugal and Ole Miss both minced to allow Hannibal was the best house boy they ever had. He was pert and supple and quick as lightning and sharp as a razor, but Chloe didn't like his ways. He was so sure he was gwine to get her in the spring that he didn't 'pear to 'low he had to do no courting, and when he'd run across Chloe about the house, he'd swell round her in a biggity way and say, "Come here and kiss me, honey. You gwine to be mine in the spring. You don't 'pear to be as fond of me as you ought to be." Chloe didn't care nothing for Hannibal, and hadn't cared nothing for him, and she sot just as much store by Jeff as she did the day she first laid eyes on him. And the mo' familiars this yere cannibal got, the mo' Chloe let her mind run on Jeff. And one evening she went down to the quarters and watched till she got a chance for to talk with him by hisself. And she told Jeff for to go down and see old Aunt Peggy, the conjure woman, down by the Wilmington Road, and ax her to give him something to help get Hannibal outen the big house, so the white folks would send for Jeff again. And being as Jeff didn't have nothing to give Aunt Peggy, Chloe gun him a silver dollar and a silk handkerchief for to pay her with, for Aunt Peggy never liked to work for nobody for nothing. So Jeff slipped down to Aunt Peggy's one night and gun her the present he brung, and told her all about him and Chloe and Hannibal, and asked her to help him out. Aunt Peggy told him she'd work the roots, and for him to come back the next night, and she'd tell him what she could do for him. So the next night Jeff went back, and Aunt Peggy gun him a baby doll, with a body made outen a piece of cornstalk, and with splinters for legs, and the head made outen elderberry pith, and 2 little red peppers for feet. "Dis yer baby doll," says she, "is Hannibal. Dis yer peth head is Hannibal's head, and dese yer pepper feet is Hannibal's feet. You take dis and hide it under the house, on the sill under the door, where Hannibal have to walk over it every day. And as long as Hannibal comes anywhere nigh dis baby doll, he'll be just like it is, light-headed and hot-footed, and if them 2 things don't get him into trouble mighty soon, then I'm no conjure woman. But when you get Hannibal outen the house, and get all through with dis baby doll, you must fetch it back to me, for it's monstrous powerful gopher, and is liable to make more trouble if you leave it layin' round." Well, Jeff took the baby doll and slip up to the big house and whistled to Chloe, and when she come out, he told her what old Aunt Peggy had said, and Chloe showed him how to get under the house, and when he had put the conjure doll on the sill, he went long back to the quarters and just waited. Next day, sure enough, the gopher minced to work. Hannibal started in the house soon in the morning with an armful of wood to make a fire, and he had no more getting across the door sill before his feet begun to burn so that he dropped the armful of wood on the floor and woke Ole Miss up an hour sooner than usual. And course, Ole Miss didn't like that, and spoke sharp about it. When dinner time come on, and Hannibal was helping the cook carry the dinner from the kitchen into the big house, and was getting close to the door where he had to go in, his feet started to burn and his head begun to swim, and he let the big dish of chicken and dumplings fall right down in the dirt in the middle of the yard, and the white folks had to make their dinner that day off of cold ham and sweetened taters. The next morning he overslept himself and got into more trouble. Atter breakfast, Mars' Dugal sent him over to Mars' Marlboro Utley's for to borrow a monkey wrench. He ought to be back in half an hour, but he come poking home by dinner time with a screwdriver instead of a monkey wrench. Mars' Dugal sent another nigger back with the screwdriver, and Hannibal didn't get no dinner. Long in the afternoon, Ole Miss sent Hannibal to weeding the flowers in the front garden, and Hannibal dug up all the bulbs Ole Miss had sot away for and paid a lot of money for, and took 'em down to the hog pen by the barnyard and fed 'em to the hogs. When Ole Miss come out in the cool of the evening and seed what Hannibal had done, she was most crazy, and she wrote a note and sent Hannibal down to the overseer with it. But what Hannibal got from the overseer didn't 'pear to do no good. Every now and then his feet 'd mence to torment him, and his mind 'd get all mixed up, and his conducts kept getting worser and worser, till finally the white folks couldn't stand it no longer, and Mars' Dugal took Hannibal back down to the quarters. "Mr. Smith," says Mars' Dugal to the overseer, "dis here nigger has done got so trifling lately that we can't keep him at the house no mo', and I's fotch him to you to be straightened up. You's had 'casion to deal with him once, so he knows what to 'spect. You des take him in hand and lemme know how he turns out. And when the hands come in from the field this evening, you can send that yeller nigger Jeff up to the house. I'll try him and see if he's any better than Hannibal." So Jeff went up to the big house, and pleased Mars' Dugal and Ole Miss and the rest of the family so well that they all got to liking him first rate, and they'd all forgot about Hannibal if it hadn't been for the bad reports what come up from the quarters about him for a month or so. Fact is that Chloe and Jeff was so entrusted in one another since Jeff being up to the big house that they forgot all about taking the baby doll back to Aunt Peggy, and it kept working for a while and making Hannibal's feet burn more or less till all the folks on the plantation got to calling him Hot-Foot Hannibal. He kept getting more and more trifling till he got the name of being the most no-counts nigger on the plantation, and Mars' Dugal had to threaten to sell him in the spring when by and by the gopher quit working, and Hannibal meant to pick up some and make folks set a little more store by him. Now, this here Hannibal was a monstrous smart nigger, and when he got rid of them sore feet, his mind kept running on his other troubles. Here, 3 or 4 weeks before, he'd had a easy job waiting on the white folks, living off the fat of the land, and promised the finest gal on the plantation for a wife in the spring, and now here he was back in the cornfield, with the overseer a cussing and a raring if he didn't get a hard task done, with nothing but cornbread and bacon and molasses to eat, and all the field hands making remarks and poking fun at him, 'cause he'd been sent back from the big house to the field. And the more Hannibal studied about it, the more madder he got, till he finally swore he was gwine to get even with Jeff and Chloe if it was the last act. So Hannibal slipped away from the quarters one Sunday and hid in the corn up close to the big house till he see Chloe gwine down the road. He waylay her, and says he, "Howdy, Chloe." "I ain't got no time for to fool with field hands," says Chloe, tossing her head. "What you want with me, Hotfoot?" "I wants to know how you and Jeff is getting along." "I 'lows dat's none o' yo' business, nigger. I don't see what 'casion any common field hand has got to mix it with de fa'rs folks what lives in de big house. En ef it'll do you any good to know, I mought say dat me en Jeff is gettin' 'long mighty well, en we gwine ter git married in de spring, en you ain't gwine ter be invited ter de weddin' nuther.' "'No, no,' sezee. 'I wouldn' 'spec ter be invited ter de weddin', a common, low down fiel' han' like I is. But I's glad ter hear you en Jeff is gettin' 'long so well. I didn' know but what he had mence ter be a little tired.' "'Tired er me? Dat's ridic'lous,' sez Chloe. 'Why, dat nigger lubs me so I b'lieve he'd go thoo fire en water fer me. Dat nigger is des wrop up in me.' "'Uh-huh,' sez Hannibal. 'Den I reckon it mus' be some udder nigger w'ats meets a 'oman down by de crick in de swamp eve'y Sunday ebenin', to say nuffin 'bout 2 or 3 times a week.' "'Yas, hit is anudder nigger, en you is a liar w'en you say it wuz Jeff.' "'Maybe I is a liar, en maybe I ain't got good eyes, but less'n I is a liar, en less'n I ain't got good eyes, Jeff is gwine ter meet dat 'oman dis ebenin', 'long about 8 o'clock, right down dere by de crick in de swamp, 'bout half way betwixt dis plantation en Mars Marrabo Utley's.' "Well, Chloe tole Hannibal she didn't b'lieve a word he said, en call 'im a low down nigger who was tryin' ter slander Jeff 'ca'se he wuz mo' luckier 'en he wuz. But all de same, she couldn't keep her mind from runnin' on what Hannibal had said. She 'membered she'd heard one er de niggers say dey wuz a gal ober at Mars Marrabo Utley's plantation what Jeff used ter go wid some befo' he got 'quainted wid Chloe. Den she 'mence' ter figger back, en sho' 'nuff, dey wuz 2 or 3 times in de las' week w'en she'd be'n helpin' de ladies wid deir dressin' en udder fixin's in de ebenin', en Jeff mought 'a' gone down ter de swamp widout her knowin' 'bout it at all. En den she 'mence' ter 'member little things what she hadn' took no notice of befo', en what 'd make it 'pear like Jeff had sump'n on his min'. Chloe set a monst'us heap er sto' by Jeff, en would 'a' done mos' anything fer 'im ez long ez he stuck to her. But Chloe wuz a mighty jealous 'oman, en w'iles she didn't b'lieve what Hannibal said, she seed how it could 'a' been so, en she 'termine' fer ter find out fer herse'f whether it wuz so or no. Now Chloe hadn't seed Jeff all day, for Mars' Dugal' had sont Jeff ober to his daughter's house, young Miss Margaret's, what lived 'bout 4 miles from Mars' Dugal's, en Jeff wasn't 'spected home till ebenin'. But des atter supper wuz ober, en w'iles de ladies wuz settin' out on de piazza, Chloe slip off from de house en run down de road, dis yer same road we come. En w'en she got mos' to de crick, dis yer same crick right befo' us, she kinder kep' in de bushes at de side er de road, till finally she seed Jeff settin' on de bank on de udder side er de crick, right under dat ole willer tree droopin' ober de water yonder. En eve'y now en den he'd git up en look up de road to'ds Mars Marrabo's on de udder side er de swamp. Fus', Chloe felt like she'd go right ober de crick en give Jeff a piece er her min'. Den she 'lowed she better be sho' befo' she done anything, so she helt herse'f in de bes' she could, gettin' madder en madder eve'y minute, till bimeby she seed a 'oman comin' down de road on de udder side from to'ds Mars Marrabo Utley's plantation. En w'en she seed Jeff jump up en run to'ds dat 'oman en th'ow his arms roun' her neck, po' Chloe didn't stop ter see no mo', but des turn roun' en run up ter de house, en rush up ter de piazza, en up en tole Mars' Dugal' en ole Miss all 'bout de baby doll, en all 'bout Jeff gittin' de gopher fum Aunt Peggy, en 'bout w'at dat gopher had done to Hannibal. Mars' Dugal' wuz monst'us mad. He didn't let on at first like he b'liebed Chloe, but w'en she tuck'n showed him whar ter find de baby doll, Mars' Dugal turned white as chalk. "What devil's work is dis?" says he. "No wonder de po' nigger's feet etched. Sump'n got to be done to learn dat ole witch to keep her hands off'n my niggers. En ez fer dis yer Jeff, I gwine to do des w'at I promise, so de darkies on dis plantation'll know I means w'at I says." For Mars' Dugal had warned the hands befo' about foolin' wid conj'ation. Fac', he had lost one or two niggers hisse'f from dey bein' gophered, and he would 'a' had ole Aunt Peggy whipped long ago, only Aunt Peggy was a free woman, and he was feared she'd conjure him. And whiles Mars' Dugal say he didn't b'liebe in conjurin' and such, he 'peared to 'low it wuz best to be on de safe side and let Aunt Peggy alone. So Mars' Dugal done des as he say. If ole Miss had pleaded for Jeff, he mought 'a' kep' him. But ole Miss hadn't got ober losin' dem bulbs yet, and she neber said a word. Mars' Dugal took Jeff to town nex' day and sole him to a spekilator, who started down de river wid him nex' mawnin' on a steamboat fer to take him to Alabama. Now, when Chloe tole ole Mars' Dugal 'bout dis yer baby doll en dis udder gopher, she hadn't hardly 'lowed Mars' Dugal would sell Jeff down Souf. Howsomever, she wuz so mad wid Jeff dat she 'suaded herse'f she didn't care. En so she helt her head up en went roun' lookin' like she wuz real glad 'bout it. But one day she wuz walkin' down de road, when who should come along but dis yer Hannibal. When Hannibal seed her, he bust out laughin' fit fer to kill. "Oh, oh, oh, hold me, honey, hold me, or I laugh myself to death. I ain't never laughed so much sence I been born." "What you laughin' at, Hotfoot?" "Yeah. What I laughin' at? Why, I's laughin' at myself, to be sho'. Laughin' to think at what a fine 'oman I made." Chloe turned pale, and her heart come up in her mouf. "What you mean, nigger?" says she, ketchin' holt of a bush by de road fer to steady herse'f. "What you mean by de kinder 'oman you made?" "What do I mean? I means dat I got squared up wid you fer treatin' me de way you done, en I got eben wid dat yaller nigger Jeff fer cuttin' me out. Now he gwine to know what it is to eat corn bread en molasses once mo', en work fum daylight to dark, en to hab a oberseer dribin' him fum one day's end to de udder. I means dat I sont word to Jeff dat Sunday dat you wuz gwine to be ober to Mars' Marrabo's visitin' dat ebenin', en you want him to meet you down by de crick on de way home en go de rest er de road wid you. En den I put on de frock en de sunbonnet en fix myself up to look like a 'oman. En when Jeff seed me comin', he run to meet me, en you seed him, fer I been watchin' in de bushes befo' en skivered you comin' down de road. En now I reckon you en Jeff bofe know what it means to mess wid a nigger like me." Poor Chloe hadn't heard mo' den half er de las' part er w'at Hannibal said, but she had heard enough to learn dat dis nigger had fooled her en Jeff, en dat po' Jeff hadn't done nuffin, en dat for lovin' her too much en goin' to meet her, she had caused him to be sole away where she'd neber see him no mo'. De sun mought shine by day, de moon by night, de flowers might bloom, en de mockingbirds might sing, but po' Jeff was done lost to her foreber en foreber. Hannibal hadn't mo' den finished what he had to say, when Chloe's knees gun way under her, and she fell down in de road, and lay there half an hour or so before she come to. When she did, she crept up to de house des as pale as a ghost. And for a month or so she crawled round de house, and 'peared to be so po'ly dat Mars' Dugal sont for a doctor, And the doctor kept on asking her questions till he found out she was des pining away for Jeff. When he told Mars' Dugal' laughed, and he said he'd fix dat. She could have de new house boy for husband. But ole Miss say no, Chloe ain't dat kind of gal, and dat Mars' Dugal' should buy Jeff back. So Mars' Dugal' writ a letter to dis yer speculator down to Wilmington, and told if he ain't done sold dat nigger South what he'd brought from him, he'd like to buy him back agin. Chloe meant to pick up a little when ole Miss told her about dis letter. Howsomever, by and by, Mars' Dugal' got a answer from de speculator, who said he was monster sorry, but Jeff had fell overboard or jumped off de steamboat on de way to Wilmington and got drownded, and course he couldn't sell him back, much as he liked to bleedge Mars' Dugal'. Well, atter Chloe heard dis, she wa'n't much mo' use to nobody. She pretended to do her work, and ole Miss put up wid her, and had de doctor give her medicine, and let her go to de circus, and all sorts of things, for to take her mind off her troubles. But dey didn't none of 'em do no good. Chloe got to slippin' down here in de evenin', des like she was comin' to meet Jeff, and she set dar under dat willow tree on de udder side and wait for him, night atter night. Bimeby she got so bad, de white folks sont her over to young Miss Boggart's fer to give her a change, but she runned away de fust night, and when dey looked fer her nex' mawnin', dey found her corpse layin' in de branch yonder, right 'cross from where we're sittin' now. Eber sence den," said Julius in conclusion, "Chloe's haunt comes eve'y evenin' and sets down under dat willow tree and waits for Jeff, and he walks up and down de road yonder, lookin' and waitin' for her sweetheart what ain't neber comin' back to her no mo'." There was silence when the old man had finished, and I am sure I saw a tear in my wife's eye, and more than one in Mabel's. "I think, Julius," said my wife after a moment, "that you may turn the mare around and go by the long road." The old man obeyed with alacrity, and I noticed no reluctance on the mare's part. "You are not afraid of Chloe's haunt, are you?" I asked jocularly. My mood was not responded to, and neither of the ladies smiled. "Oh, no," said Annie, "but I've changed my mind. I prefer the other route." When we had reached the main road and had proceeded along it for a short distance, we met a cart driven by a young negro, and on the cart were a trunk and a valise. We recognized the man as Malcolm Murchison's servant, and drew up a moment to speak to him. "Who's going away, Marshal?" I inquired. "Young Master Malcolm gwine way on de boat to New York dis evenin', sah, and I'm taking his things down to the wharf, sah." This was news to me, and I heard it with regret. My wife looked sorry, too, and I could see that Mabel was trying hard to hide her concern. "He's comin' along behind, sah, and I 'spect you'll meet him up de road a piece. He's gwine to walk down as far as Master Jim Williams, and take de buggy from dar to town. He 'spects to be gone a long time, sah, and say probably he ain't never comin' back." The man drove on. There were few words exchanged in an undertone between my wife and Mabel, which I did not catch. Then Annie said, "Julius, you may stop the rockaway a moment. There are some trumpet flowers by the road there that I want. Will you get them for me, John?" I sprang into the underbrush, and soon returned with a great bunch of scarlet blossoms. "Where is Mabel?" I asked, noting her absence. "She has walked on ahead. We shall overtake her in a few minutes." The carriage had gone only a short distance when my wife discovered that she had dropped her fan. "I had it where we were stopping, Julius. Will you go back and get it for me?" Julius got down and went back for the fan. He was an unconscionably long time finding it. After we got started again, we had gone only a little way, when we saw Mabel and young Murchison coming toward us. They were walking arm in arm, and their faces were aglow with the light of love. I do not know whether or not Julius had a previous understanding with Malcolm Murchison by which he was to drive us round by the long road that day, nor do I know exactly what motive influenced the old man's exertions in the matter. He was fond of Mabel, but I was old enough and knew Julius well enough to be skeptical of his motives. It is certain that a most excellent understanding existed between him and Murchison after the reconciliation, and that when the young people set up housekeeping over at the old Murchison place, Julius had an opportunity to enter their service. For some reason or other, however, he preferred to remain with us. The mare, I might add, was never known to balk again. End of Hot Foot Hannibal. Recording by Phil Chenevert.